Buenos dias. I bring you warm greetings from the American Association for Public Opinion Research, APOR. It's an honor to be here today with you at the Institute for National Elections. I would like to speak to you this morning about current challenges to public opinion research with a bit of an American perspective on that. Over the past 70 years, public opinion research has grown across the globe. It has shown itself to be highly adaptable. It has developed and implemented new methodologies time after time, new methodologies that address ever-evolving social and technological environments. During the latter half of the 20th century, pollsters have sometimes been viewed as scientific celebrities. They were courted by presidents, consulted by industry, respected by the public. Survey research today is even more prevalent. A recent study by WAPOR, the World Association for Public Opinion Research, confirms that surveys are used worldwide to acquire the information necessary to more effectively manage economies and public affairs. But survey research has not been without its critics, especially in the academic arena. Sociologist Aaron Sickerell published an important critique of survey methodology back in the early 1960s. He focused powerfully on the absence of ecological validity in data derived from questionnaires and interviews. Another sociologist, Elvin Gouldner, published his most famous work in 1970. In it, he dismissed survey research as nothing more than market research for the welfare state. 20 years later, in 1990, Lucy Suckman and Bridget Jordan published an influential paper in the American Journal of the Statistical Association. They tried to address the still unresolved tension in our field, that between the survey interview as an interactional event on one hand, and on the other hand, the survey interview as a neutral measurement instrument. In all fairness, many researchers have thoughtfully considered these concerns and developed new methods and strategies to address them. But as we know, survey research is today facing other critiques, some of which present us with what some feel are seemingly impossible challenges. These have created a new environment for survey research, one in which intersecting sociological, technological, and political pressures are converging in a perfect storm to delegitimize and devalue survey research. The Free Dictionary defines delegitimation as to discredit the public or political recognition or support of something. Throughout history, in fact, there are many examples of once trusted institutions or activities who became delegitimized by factions in society. Today, a number of symptoms tell us that survey research is becoming one such target. A few such symptoms are listed in this diagram. You'll note the bidirectional arrows here, as I'm thinking these processes are somewhat reinforcing of one another. First are indications of declining public trust or confidence in social statistics. Some believe that statistical data are either impossible to construct accurately or are commonly manipulated to support pre-existing beliefs or policy agendas. This may be in part due to lack of knowledge among the public about how statistical data are collected or aggregated. It does not help that media reports of statistics can sometimes be confusing or contradictory. Do those clinical trials really suggest a link between coffee consumption and cancer? Or is coffee a protective factor? Are the monthly unemployment rates in the United States really being manipulated by whoever happens to be in the White House? Of course, it depends on who you ask. There was a Marketplace Edison research poll conducted in late 2016 in the US. It reported that 1/4 of all adults in their sample had no trust at all, no trust, in data reported by the federal government about the US economy. Not surprisingly, lack of trust also varied dramatically by major party support. Then there was a recent Economist YouGov poll. It also asked about public perceptions of the accuracy of several established sets of government statistics. Their findings show that only between 20 and 25% of adults believe these federal statistical systems provide accurate information. Joel Best is the author of multiple books concerning the general quality of social statistics. He suggests that statistical information can be intimidating and is often used as a weapon during debate. Edward Tufte, the noted expert on data visualization, agrees. He says that statistics are not commonly used as a means to open a problem for conversation and deliberation, but as a weapon to intimidate and close discussion. Of course, none of us wants this, but these beliefs are likely far more widespread than we would like to think. It probably doesn't help that one of the best examples of the weaponization of statistics in the U.S. is the common use of official government census data to gerrymander the nation's congressional districts. Of course, my hometown of Chicago is no slouch in this regard. Here's my favorite, the 4th Congressional District in Chicago. There's my university's campus. Also, recently announced plans to add a citizenship item to the 2020 decennial census in the U.S. seem to have a clear political motivation, one that will cause many to question the accuracy, the quality, and the objectivity of this fundamental statistical resource. And this leads us to a second symptom. Research by public opinion researchers demonstrates, ironically, that Americans do not especially trust public opinion researchers. In March of last year, the McClatchy-Maris poll asked a U.S. sample how much they trusted 7 public institutions. Among those examined, public opinion polls ranked second to last. Thank God for Congress. Data on this topic are somewhat hard to come by, but there is other evidence. In the 8 years from 1998 to 2006, the Lewis Harris poll asked respondents if they would generally trust a variety of different types of professionals. Teachers were most trusted. During this time period, trust in pollsters dropped from 55% to 34%, a 21 percentage point drop. This decline exceeded that of any of the other 16 professions that were tracked. I wonder what those numbers would look like today. Exhibit A here, of course, is the 2016 U.S. presidential election. If you're like me, seldom does a day pass when you are not obligated to correct the declaration of a friend, an acquaintance, or a university administrator that the U.S. surveys got it wrong in 2016. This is going to be with us for a long time. It's ironic that this is perhaps the one thing on which, to this day, supporters of both major U.S. political parties seem to be in agreement about. APOR, of course, did an excellent job in critiquing that widespread misconception, but it still persists and seems to have taken root uncritically in many quarters of the public. Of course, this concern expands across much of the world. Several perceived failures in Great Britain led to a recent investigation of public opinion polls in that country by the House of Lords, which issued a report in April of 2018 that recommended greater oversight of public opinion polling in that country. According to that recent WAPOR study that I mentioned earlier, more than half of the 129 nations surveyed indicated that they had a blackout period for pre-election polls during which polling results could not be released to the public. Nations colored in red in this map are those that have blackout periods of a week or longer. You will notice that South American nations are especially likely to have longer blackout restrictions for election polls. As a third symptom of how survey research is being devalued, there are also those declining response rates, which we are also seeing worldwide. Indeed, they were perhaps our earliest indicator, the canary in the coal mine. variety of ongoing activities and social trends are also contributing to the devaluation of survey research. Unlike the symptoms we just went over, these seem to have fairly direct effects on the delegitimation process. One of these we can refer to as things that annoy respondents. This would include telemarketing activities, which we've been concerned about now for several decades. Unwanted telemarketing and robocalls continue to be a common source of complaints. In the United States, it is estimated that about 3.4 billion robocalls were made in this past April alone. That's more than 10 robocalls for every person in the United States per month. To make matters worse, in response to consumer complaints, smartphone vendors are developing spam warning features that will warn of or block calls from suspicious telephone numbers, including telephone survey operations centers. Something else that annoys potential respondents are activities such as sugging and frugging. Sugging, of course, is selling under the guise of surveys, while frugging is fundraising under the guise of surveys. Politicians do it, businesses do it, charities do it. These examples, understandably, leave many people very cynical about receiving survey requests. To be sure, modern life has been made so much more convenient through evolving technologies. But for many, these can also increase fear and suspicion and anxiety. The Earl Babby Center at Chapman University in California periodically conducts a fear survey in the United States. In 2014, it found that the top two things that Americans were concerned about were having their identity stolen on the internet and corporate surveillance of internet activity. Number 4 in that poll was fear of government surveillance. And those results were among actual respondents. Non-respondents might well be expected to have greater anxieties about identity theft and surveillance. And then there are more direct, intentional activities that also serve to delegitimize survey and public opinion research. Public attempts to manipulate surveys have a notorious history. In the US presidential primaries in 1996, for example, supporters of Patrick Buchanan were reported to have actively sought out pollsters in order to maximize support for their candidate. Then there was the famous Chicago newspaper columnist, Mike Royko, who frequently encouraged his leaders to lie to the pollsters. Why would he do that? He argued that they should lie because pollsters were ruining, and I quote, what used to be the most entertaining and exciting part of an election, the suspense of watching the results trickle in, unquote. In other words, pre-election polls were spoiling his entertainment. And Arianna